The United States and Israel's coordinated airstrikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan early this morning, mark a brazen act of aggression that shatters any pretense of respect for international law or regional stability. President Donald Trump, in a televised address, crowed that the strikes completely and totally obliterated Iran's nuclear program.
The U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime, Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
While Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu hailed the operation as a historic blow against an existential threat.
Congratulations, President Trump. Your bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities with the awesome and righteous might of the United States will change history. In Operation Rising Lion, Israel has done truly amazing things. But in tonight's action against Iran's nuclear facilities, America has been truly unsurpassed. It has done what no other country on earth could do.
But this triumphalist rhetoric masks a grim reality. The attacks are a reckless gamble that violates Iran's sovereignty, inflames an already volatile region, and risks plunging the world into a broader conflict with devastating consequences. Far from neutralizing Iran's nuclear ambitions, the campaign is likely to entrench Tehran's resolve, alienate global allies, and expose the US and Israel's imperialist agenda for what it is, a relentless drive to dominate the Middle East at any cost.
تنها بخشی که در سایت هسته‌ای فوردو آسیب دیده این تونل‌های ورودی و خروجی بودند و آسیبی به خود تأسیسات
که چه موضوعی بوده. ولی اگر حرف ترامپ هم درست باشه ضربه چندانی خورده نشده، به خاطر اینکه عملاً در اونجا مدتی پیش مواد تخلیه شده. ببینید نتنز در نزدیکی کاشان قرار داره و در اینجاش که اسم سایتش سایت شهید احمدی روشن هست، یک کار تحقیقاتی و نسل اول سانتریفیوژ ها در اونجا کار گذاشته شده بود.
Let's start with the facts of the assault. The US deployed B-2 stealth bombers, armed with 30,000-pound GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator bunker buster bombs, to target Fordo's deeply buried uranium enrichment facility, while 30 Tomahawk missiles launched from submarines 400 miles away struck Natanz's enrichment plant and Isfahan's centrifuge workshops. Israel, which initiated its campaign on June 13th, had already damaged these sites, killing 3 senior Iranian commanders and targeting air defenses and missile infrastructure.
This is a statement from Donald Trump, quote, "We have completed our very successful attack on the 3 nuclear sites in Iran," etc.
The US strikes were not a spontaneous response, but a meticulously planned escalation, rehearsed with Israel over a year ago, according to ABC News. Trump's claim that the facilities were obliterated is dubious. Experts like former US Assistant Secretary of State Mark Kimmett argue that Fordo's fortifications make complete destruction unlikely without sustained ground operations, which neither country is prepared to undertake. Iran's Atomic Energy Organization dismissed the attacks as savage, but vowed to continue its nuclear program, underscoring the futility of this military approach. The legal and moral bankruptcy of this campaign is undeniable. Iran's nuclear facilities are under IAEA monitoring, and strikes on safeguarded sites like the Arak Heavy Water Research Reactor violate UN Security Council Resolution 2231 and the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA.
Tell you something, not only is this news that I've just heard the second alarming that all of you have just heard, but it is so grossly unconstitutional. All of you know that the only entity that can take this country to war is the U.S. Congress. The president does not have the right.
Iran's mission to the UN labeled Israel's earlier attacks war crimes and accused the IAEA of complicity for failing to condemn them, a charge now amplified by U.S. involvement. The UN Charter prohibits military action against a sovereign nation absent self-defense or Security Council approval, neither of which applies here. Iran has not attacked the US or Israel. Its missile strikes on Israeli targets were retaliatory responses to Israel's unprovoked campaign. By joining the assault, the US endorses a dangerous precedent of preemptive strikes based on unverified threats, echoing the catastrophic 2003 Iraq invasion. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres called the US operation a direct threat to international peace and security, warning of catastrophic consequences for civilians, the region, and the world. The human toll is staggering and deliberately downplayed by Western media. Iran's state-run Noor News reports over 430 deaths and 3,500 injuries since Israel's campaign began, with US strikes adding to the carnage. Social media posts from Iranians reveal the terror gripping civilians, families fleeing Tehran, overcrowded shelters, and fears of radiological contamination from Fordow, where highly enriched uranium is stored. The IAEA notes that previous strikes on Natanz caused only localized damage, but a direct hit on Iran's Bushehr nuclear power plant, spared so far, could release a very high level of radioactivity, according to Director General Rafael Grossi. Beyond the immediate devastation, the attacks have displaced thousands, disrupted Iran's economy, and fueled anti-American and anti-Israeli rage across the region. Protests have erupted from Istanbul to Karachi, while Iran's armed forces threaten to target military aid shipments to Israel, signaling potential disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz, a choke point for 20% of global oil. The strategic miscalculation here is profound. Israel and the US claim their goal is to eliminate Iran's nuclear program, but history suggests otherwise. After Israel's 1981 strike on Iraq's Osirak reactor, Saddam Hussein accelerated his nuclear efforts in secret. Iran, with its advanced scientific base and regional alliances, is likely to follow suit, dispersing its program to evade future attacks. The strikes also risk strengthening Iran's hardline regime rather than toppling it, as some Israeli officials hope. Public anger over foreign aggression could rally Iranians around their government, much like during the 1980-1988 Iran-Iraq war. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, warned of dire consequences, and Tehran's allies, Lebanese resistance, the Yemen, and militias in Iraq and Syria, retain the capacity for asymmetric retaliation. Houthi leader Hizam al-Assad vowed to target U.S. warships in the Red Sea, while a senior Iranian advisor called for missile strikes on U.S. Navy vessels and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. These threats could draw U.S. forces into a prolonged conflict, undermining Trump's campaign promise to avoid costly foreign wars. The hypocrisy of the U.S. and Israel's narrative is galling. Both nations accuse Iran of destabilizing the region, yet Israel maintains an undeclared nuclear arsenal of 400 warheads facing no international censure. The U.S., which withdrew from the JCPOA in 2018, reimposed sanctions that pushed Iran to resume uranium enrichment, then blamed Tehran for the collapse of diplomacy. Trump's administration ignored Iran's willingness to negotiate, as Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi noted, refusing talks while under Israeli bombardment. The US contacted Iran through back channels to claim the strikes were contained and not aimed at regime change. But such assurances ring hollow when Iran's infrastructure lies in ruins. Russia and China condemned the attacks, while allies like Egypt and Turkey expressed alarm, with President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi rejecting Israel's campaign and Turkey's leader calling Netanyahu the biggest obstacle to peace. And MAGA figures like Steve Bannon and Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene questioning the intervention. The broader consequences are chilling. The strikes have fractured global alliances, emboldened adversaries, and pushed the Middle East toward a conflict no one can control. Iran's likely retaliation, whether through proxies, cyber attacks, or direct strikes, could target US bases in Iraq, Syria, or the Gulf, where 45,000 American troops are stationed. A disruption in the Strait of Hormuz could spike oil prices, triggering a global economic crisis. The campaign has also undermined the nuclear non-proliferation regime, encouraging other nations to pursue covert programs to deter similar attacks. Diplomatically, the US and Israel face isolation, with the global South increasingly aligning against Western hegemony. Posts on X reflect public outrage, with users like calling Israel's initial strikes unprovoked and illegal, arguing they guaranteed Iranian counterstrikes rather than fostering peace. This campaign is not about security, it's about power. The US and Israel seek to crush a regional rival that dares to challenge their dominance, regardless of the cost. But Iran is not Iraq or Libya. It's a resilient nation with a sophisticated military and a web of alliances. The strikes may have damaged centrifuges, but they've ignited a fire that could consume the region. The world deserves better than this imperialist folly, driven by two nations who mistake bombs for solutions and sow chaos in the name of peace. As the Middle East braces for Iran's response, one thing is clear. The US and Israel have opened a Pandora's box, and no one can predict what horrors will emerge.